Oh, yeah. You're listening to the 70s Kiss podcast. And I'm your host, the plaster podcaster, Steve-O from Knoxville, Tennessee. This show is about Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss. If you're looking for something else, you can just keep on knocking. Yeah, make sure you go to 70skiss.com and check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/70s Kiss podcast for more interviews and hang out with the community and hang out with the people that are checking us out. We're checking you out at the same time. And here we go again, and I have on the line the original Catwoman, Lydia Criss. How's it going, Lydia?
Oh, it's going fine. How you doing, Steve?
Not too bad. Thanks for coming on. Just want to talk with you about your time in early Kiss and what you're doing these days. So without further ado, let's get into it. So tell us how you met Peter.
Well, I was a teenager, and I had just graduated high school. I was working in a department store, Abercrombie and Fitch, which used to be it was a sporting goods store. And I had a girlfriend that I had gone to school with, and she wanted to go. She wanted me to meet Peter. She kind of had a feeling I'd like him. Turns out we went to the beach that day. It was in July. It was about 103 degrees. And we went to the beach, and I got burnt. And I really didn't feel well, so I didn't want to go. She wanted me to go down into Williamsburg, which is where I used to go to school. And I kind of said no. I was living about a half an hour away by train. And she talked me into it. She says, oh, please, go, let's go just for an hour. And I said, okay, I'll go. So I went, and it was in a club in Williamsburg. It was called the Highway Lounge. And she was going out with a bass player. And so she introduced me to Peter. And, we talked that evening. And I wasn't that impressed with him because he was a little cocky. He thought... He just was in love with himself at the time, but he asked me out to go to the beach with him the next day, believe it or not. And even though I was burnt from the sunburn the day before, I still went to the beach with him the next day with a bunch of friends. We all met at the same beach, and then from there it just became, little by little we just kept dating, and then eventually he asked me to be his girlfriend.
Very, very cool. Well, what was it like back then, Lydia? Were you and Peter from middle-class families? Did your families have money? Were you poor kids growing up in the ghetto? Kind of give us an insight on that.
We both were from pretty poor families. Peter's family was from Williamsburg, and there were 5 children in his family. There were 5 children in my family. We had just moved out of housing projects. I think I was living in, my parents finally bought a home, and I was only there for maybe 6 weeks before I met Peter. So basically I grew up, semi-poor, and he grew up semi-poor. We just come from very humble Italian. Well, he's part Italian. I'm all Italian. Our families are very family-oriented.
Mm-hmm. So in those days, I guess you were there to experience some of Peter's early bands and stuff before the Kiss thing happened. And I know from what you're saying that, basically Peter, is a success story from, going from a poor guy to the biggest band in the world. What was that like? And tell me some of your first experiences with Kiss.
Well, first he was in. I went out with Peter for 3.5 years before we got married, and then we were married for about 2 years before. Well, actually 2.5 years before he met Kiss. So I was kind of with Peter 6 years before he was with Kiss. He was with a lot of other bands. I mean, there was, he would leave one band and kind of take some of the guys with him to the next band, and he kind of was the leader of all the bands he was in up until, maybe up until Chelsea. Chelsea was kind of an equal. Well, everybody was equal in the band, and then after Chelsea, he was in a band called Lips, believe it or not. And then right after that, Kiss. He at that point he just severed ties with everybody and put an ad in Rolling Stone, and Gene called and answered the ad, and that's when it all started with Kiss.
Was that the very first time you had met Gene and Paul? Were they like in the neighborhood? Did you guys know them before?
No, we didn't know them, but they lived in Queens. We lived in Brooklyn, and we were living. It was in our second apartment after we got married, and they were still living with their parents. So we all met, I went down with Peter, and we met at Electric Ladyland Studios, where they were waiting outside, and we kind of didn't even realize it was them. We walked right by them, and then I said, I think that's them. And so then, it was on 8th Street, where the recording studio that Jimi Hendrix used to own.
Right. And what was that like going into that studio? Was there an aura about it? I mean, knowing that Hendrix had been the guy there?
Yeah, there was a lot of vibes. There was, it was a great, just going down there for the first time was really exciting, knowing that, Jimi Hendrix was there. But then as the years went by, I was down there a lot. And even after I was divorced from Peter, I was down there a lot. I was friends with, one of the girls that worked at Electric Lady, so we were always invited to different things down there. I remember once we went to a little private premiere showing of a listening party for Alice Cooper for when he put out an album called Hey Stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's. There was a lot of times I was down in Electric Lady for different reasons. I mean, also during the recordings of some of, a lot of the Kiss albums.
So what was it like when Kiss very first hit? When you and Peter were married, and I read in a book somewhere where it says that that you weren't allowed to say that you were married to him while he was in Kiss, and I know that you're married to a rock star, and all of a sudden overnight success happens, and every girl in America is wanting to meet your husband. What was your feelings with that at the very beginning? I know you lightened up to it and understood it later, but how did that make you feel? Well, it wasn't exactly an overnight success. Right.
Kiss met. Peter met Gene and Paul in 1972. Okay, they were on the road until about the end of 75. It was the middle of 72. So I would say 72. So I'd say 3.5 years of hard work. They were on the road a lot, and they also played a lot. They really, they would play, I'd say 5 nights a week. Out of the 7, and they were, they'd be back and forth. They'd be out, and, then they'd come home for a little bit, and then they'd be out again. And so they weren't out on the road. They were doing another album. So it was constant work. And finally, when they did make it, it was, there were times where they were going to be dropped from the record label if things didn't work, and eventually what happened was they decided to do a live album, and that's the album that went gold. It was a day after my birthday. I'll never forget. I had gotten, believe it or not, I had gotten laid off from my job. Only because Peter wanted me to quit, and I didn't want to quit, but I would, do things that I went on the road when I when my bosses didn't allow me to take the day off, I would take it off anyway. And so I eventually got laid off. And that same day that I got laid off, Kiss, Paul Stanley's girlfriend, called me and told me Kiss Alive went gold. And from then on, it was all uphill. I mean, I was living in Brooklyn in a one-bedroom apartment, but it was small. And I was told to go look for an apartment in Manhattan. So that became my job. See, I had a job up until 75. And then looking for an apartment became my job, and I did that, and we moved out by the end of November, this was the beginning of November that Alive went gold. And then from then on, it was, we were living in Manhattan. It was that was probably my favorite part, was when we lived in the city. And as far as the girls go, well, I mean, I knew there were, every girl wanted to meet Peter, but I'm the one that was married to him, so
absolutely.
It didn't really bother me, until after a while, I kind of knew that some things were going on. There's stories in my book about, me finding telephone numbers of different girls.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure that happened, but I guess what I was trying to say is, how did that make you feel when they did have their overnight success, and then all of a sudden they become this big thing? And did it change you? Did it change Peter immediately?
No, because the thing is, you don't feel the money right away, because it's sort of, they say it's in a pipeline, so you don't really get a lot of money. Basically, it turned out all of our bills were paid for, so that was a good thing. And, but that also made me feel, I felt, believe it or not, a little insecure, because I was paying the bills, and I felt like, that my house, I actually wrote this line. I said, I don't feel my house is my home, because, I wasn't paying the bills anymore. And they put it in Beth. They added that line into Beth, and I'll never get credit for it, but I did write that line. But I felt a little uncomfortable, like I still wasn't used to spending tons of money. So everything was, everything went along slowly, I decorated the apartment that we lived in, and that was nice. And, then eventually we were told to move to Connecticut. So that was a big step, and, moving to Connecticut, really made me feel like I was married to a rock star.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen some of the photographs, and I saw some of the pictures in your book of the home and everything. And it's just, for me, when I was a kid, I would read about you every once in a while. They would have something in there in some of the Kiss magazines, but you were like the only girl that they really talked about until like maybe Gene Simmons met Cher. And basically these guys, to me, were superhuman. They didn't have girlfriends. It wasn't really about rock and roll to me,
We were told not. I was supposed to be a secret. Like, they didn't want the girls to know that Peter was married. Same thing as they did to John Lennon and Cynthia. They didn't want, when I was growing up, I was a Beatle fan, and they didn't want the fans to know that John was married to Cynthia. And, I was the only married person at the time, but Jeanette was around. Jeanette Ace's wife. They got married in '76. You don't remember that?
Yeah. Well, I didn't read too much about them as much as I did hear about you, and it may have been because of Beth, and everything that happened with Peter, and then you coming out and accepting the award and everything. So yeah, people knew you were Beth.
That was a very unusual thing that they were booked to play somewhere in Fargo, North Dakota, and they said they couldn't accept the award. So jokingly, I said, I'll accept it, and Gene said, okay. And I thought I was hearing things.
Yeah.
And I had to get clothing. I had to go out shopping. I had 10 days. I lost 10 pounds in 10 days because I was such a nervous wreck.
Wow.
I couldn't eat.
I was watching that video the other night, and I was like, man, that's something. I mean, that People's Choice Award, it was a pretty cool award. I don't think any of the other guys in the band's ever received that kind of award before. But
No.
Beth was pretty big, which was one of the things that, with this whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing, I know that everybody's had differences. Even you've had your differences with Peter and everything, and Ace. I'm a big Kiss fan that includes all four of the original members. I mean, to me, the original members are Kiss, and I met Eric Carr. Eric Carr was a great guy, and I know there's been new members coming in, ever since everything broke up. But to me, as a kid, when I come up, the original Kiss are the original four members, and one of the things that I think that may be affecting Paul and Gene right now, especially with the differences that's going on between them. If they did go up on stage and play at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the biggest song that they ever did was Beth. That was the biggest song that ever happened for them. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Peter's going to close the show with Beth, and it's just going to knock them all dead. And I just don't think that Paul's ego could handle that right now.
Yeah, that's a point. I never thought of that one.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Even if that Gene and Paul doesn't want to play, Peter could go up with the Paul Schaefer band, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, Paul Schaefer and them, did they have anything to do with Beth?
No.
Okay. That's Ace. So he goes up, and I'm sure Paul Schaefer's band could handle Beth. Bring in a few of the orchestra people. And,
sure.
And then Ace get up there and play with Anton and Will Lee, and there you go, a couple of guys from his '78 album. So they could go up and play without Gene and Paul.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. If Peter did Beth, though, I mean, let's just say it was the original four guys, they get up there and they're going to do the song they're most known for. It's going to knock the house down. I mean, that song had a powerful impact, on the band.
Yeah, well, that song, that kept them out of, well, let me put it this way. We were all on our way to Japan, and this was right after I accepted the People's Choice Award. It was literally like a week later, and we were in the airport in New York, and we were all like kind of waiting around, doing different things. And I thought it would be nice to kind of thank everybody for making it possible for me to go to Japan. So I started with Gene, and I said, Gene, I just want to thank you for making it possible for me to go to Japan. And he said, don't thank me for making it possible. He says, thank Beth. That made it possible for all of us to go to Japan.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that bothers me with the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing. These guys are, I just heard a story the other day where somebody that worked with Ace insinuated that Gene Simmons had told Ace back when they did the Kiss My Ass album that, in order for you to be able to do a reunion tour ever with us again, you'll have to sell the rights to your makeup to the corporation, or it will never happen. So I'm sitting here thinking, wow, they forced Ace to sell his makeup. And from what I read in Peter's book, he said when he went into the insane asylum to get dried out, that Kiss had sent two representatives or management over to the place to get him to sign some papers, some documents. And he said when he walked in the insane asylum, he was a millionaire. He said when he walked out, he was broke.
Well, I don't know too much about the insane asylum part because I really wasn't with him. But I do know that before he went into that rehab place, he had already sold his makeup, because he told me on the phone that he was selling his makeup back when I first moved into Manhattan, after selling my house in Connecticut, which was in 1985. So in 1985, he sold his makeup. He was with Debbie at the time, and I thought it was a bad move, but obviously he must have needed the money.
Right.
So I don't know the timeline, as far as when he was in the rehab place and the time I spoke to him. I really wasn't in touch with him, and I still am not really in touch with him much. I mean, we see each other, the last time I saw him was the first time I saw him in 15 years.
Right.
So I don't really know some of that part of his book, because I can't, I wasn't around. But,
right.
But I do know other parts of the book.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. So tell us a little bit about the early days, or maybe, just let's talk about some things in the book that you don't agree with.
Well, there were just, all right, it's not that I don't agree with them, but there were times where Peter would tell a story, and Peter has the ability to exaggerate enormously. Like he used to do this to my family. He used to tell everyone, hey, I'm playing the Beacon and I'm making $25,000 just for playing the Beacon, and this is like, say, in the early days, and I would just look at him and say, you're not making $25,000. It's like maybe the band might be making 25, but not you. And then he would also exaggerate things, like instead of saying, hey, we're going to be playing Madison Square Garden and we're going to be making $1 million. Like he would make my family think, and he would also make his own family think that things were much bigger than they were. I mean, there's a story in his book about Sean Delaney and some drugs. But you know what it is? In the front of his book, he said he did change the names of a lot of people purposely.
Yeah.
So that's where he gets away with lying. It's not even lying as much as I don't think he remembers certain things. And there's certain things he does lie. I mean, there's a time where he says there were 10 naked girls in his room. He's lucky if there were 2. It's just certain things like that. He's lucky if there was 1 naked girl in his room. But it's weird that, he's a very big exaggerator. And Gene Simmons will agree with me on that 100%. He just likes to exaggerate. I mean, there was a story, like I was saying before, about Sean Delaney. I don't think that ever happened. And if it did happen, I don't think it was Sean Delaney, because Sean was one of my really good friends. I mean, he used to stay with me in my apartment, and he would have told me that story, because we used to sit up nights talking all the time about the olden days. And he would have told me that story. I mean, it could be that it was somebody else, Stan Penridge. I don't know. But there's also a story that he tells about one night when we were living in Manhattan that he was going to throw all of his. I don't know if he tells the story that's the exact way it happened, but he was going to throw all of his albums out the window, and he was going to stand off with the police.
Yeah.
And he said Sean Delaney came over, and it wasn't Sean, it was Bill Aucoin. So it's like he has things, mixed up, but I think he did it purposely, just not to be able to, like he said, like I'm telling you, one of the first lines in his book is that he changed the names of a lot of people I think it's, I don't know what his reason was, but I think he just doesn't know. He doesn't remember a lot of what actually went on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's very understandable.
Well, it was a lot of times it was a lot of drugs.
Right, and it, and booze and whatever else. And speaking of that, we always hear one side of, Ace and Peter were the bad boys, and they pretty much come out in the book and gave us a taste of it. So I can just only imagine. But were Gene and Paul? I mean, were they angels?
As far as I know, I have never ever known Gene to drink or to do a drug except once. He was tricked, not actually tricked. But Gene loves cookies and cakes and stuff like that at night with a glass of milk. And it was Peter's birthday, and somebody gave Peter hash-laced brownies or marijuana-laced brownies. And Peter just didn't even know it himself. He just gave them to Gene. He says, I'm not going to, I don't want... Peter's was always watching his weight. So he said, "Here, Gene, you take the brownies and eat them." And it turns out that there was something in them. I'm not sure if it was hash or marijuana. And that was the only time I remember Gene ever being involved with any kind of drugs. And as far as Paul, the only thing I've seen Paul have a few drinks, and that's about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to talk to somebody that may have been around to know, because they portray themselves like they're spotless, they're clean. And for me, myself, being out on the road and playing in bands, not anything big, which has the same problems, the same issues with drugs and alcohol. And nobody was clean. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, so let's go a little further. So whenever you had your break with Peter, and it was time for Lydia Criss to move on with her life, what happened? Did you pick up the camera in the early days, or was it something that just happened out of the blue to take you forward into life? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I always liked taking pictures, and I had, when I was 16, my best friend gave me a Kodak Instamatic camera. My mother always took pictures. She had a little brownie camera. My uncle was a professional photographer. So we were always documenting everything in the family. So it was kind of in my blood. So I took the camera. Yeah, I used to take little Instamatic photos, which you could tell in the beginning of my book that, they're not professional photos. They're just snapshots. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to Japan, Peter bought me a camera. That was, I guess, one of my birthday presents. He bought me a camera when we were in Japan, and I started learning how to use a professional camera. But then when, I didn't really take it too seriously because it was a lot to learn, and we were still touring and doing stuff like that. So, but then eventually when we were breaking up, I said, I got to do something in my life. And right before we actually broke up, Jeanette and I decided to take a class in Manhattan in photography. So Jeanette, believe it or not, never followed through, but I did. And I would go to the city and learn learn how to use the camera professionally. And that's what started my interest in, taking really nice photos at concerts and stuff like that. And
was it one of your first bands, Van Halen?
Well, I shot Van Halen at a concert, and also Cheap Trick. I knew Van Halen personally, actually. I was hanging out with Eddie when I was in when I broke up with Peter. He went to Paris with Debbie, and I went to England with one of the guys in Angel. I started dating Mickey Jones, and he knew Van Halen personally because they were all from Los Angeles, and they were also no, they weren't on the same record label. No, they were on Angel was on the same record label as Kiss, but Van Halen wasn't. But they knew each other, so I was hanging out with Van Halen in London, and then when we came back, I went to one of their concerts, and I shot some photos that are in my book.
Yeah, so that was one of your first experiences in Cheap Trick, and so it turned into something else. It got bigger, and then later on in life, you end up running into the bands and stuff like Kiss and stuff, being a professional photographer, right?
Yeah. I took pictures of them. What happened was I took pictures of Rod Stewart that really came out great, It was, I think, in his 1981 tour. And then by 1982, there was some sort of a party at Studio 54, and I went down there. I was invited down, and I saw Bob Gruen. Bob Gruen is, he took the Dress to Kill album cover, and also went to Japan with us, and I hadn't seen him in a while, so, you know, I was talking to him, and I said, you know, I got these Rod Stewart photos, you know, what should I do with them? And he said, well, you know, give them to Ginny. Ginny is starting an agency. So he turns out he reintroduced me to Ginny. I didn't really remember her, but he reintroduced me to her, and then she was my agent starting in, you know, once she started the agency in 82, and I stayed with her up until 2001, actually. So I worked with her for a long time, and she, you know, she would send me out to, you know, to do photo shoots, and you know, one of them was Kiss.
What was the biggest one that you've done? What's your favorite shoot that you've done?
Probably Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
You know, I love Rod Stewart and Queen. I love Queen. You know, I shot them too. Those were my two favorite. You know, Queen had incredible lighting, so that was, you know, fun to shoot. Kiss was always fun to shoot, but I wasn't allowed to shoot Kiss. Peter didn't want me in the pit, you know, because it was a little dangerous because of the explosives. So I didn't get to shoot Kiss a lot. And then eventually when they did the Dynasty tour, which I was already separated from Peter, I brought my camera and got some really good shots because I was sitting, my girlfriend, believe it or not, had gotten tickets in the third row. So I was sitting with her. And then I took also some Dynasty shots up in Connecticut when I was just about divorced, but not, you know, I wasn't backstage or anything. So
I'm not asking for personal stuff, but is there something that you know about the band that is just crazy that nobody knows about?
Oh, I don't really know.
It doesn't have to be bad, or I mean, just something that would surprise people.
That's a hard one. I don't really think I didn't tell everything I knew in my book.
Yeah.
Basically, I think you have to read my book, and that tells all the, you know, some of the stories that most people don't know about.
Tell us a little bit about the book and where people can get it and your website.
Okay, it's the book is called Sealed with a Kiss. It has been out since 2006, but it's been revised, and I added more pages about a year and a half ago. So it's 384 pages, I believe. It used to be 368. It's a hardcover book. It's, you know, it's coffee table size. It weighs almost 5 pounds.
Wow.
It's full color, full glossy color photos. It starts in the early days when I first met Peter with the, you know, some of the earlier bands that he played in, and then it goes into Kiss, and then it goes into my life after Kiss.
Okay, cool. One other question here for you is...
Wait, one more thing I want to say. It has a lot of about 1,500 photos altogether, but a lot of them are early Kiss without makeup.
Wow. Now that's something, that right there is the thing I think where the guys messed up is taking the makeup off in the first place. And I don't know if any of the friendship type thing could have been salvaged where they could have stayed together and, you know, been Led Zeppelin, you know what I mean? And you know, here they are up into their age, and they could have, to me, I think that they understand that the four of them, whether they hate each other or not, they have a chemistry that cannot be duplicated. And just like Led Zeppelin, you know, or one of these other big bands, or like Rolling Stones, Rod Stewart, anybody that has theirself established like that. It saddens me that they took the makeup off in the 80s and all of that. So in the 70s, when they were behind the makeup, and every once in a while you'd see them in magazines and they would have their hand in front of their face trying to hide themselves.
Right, right.
And I know you were there during this time. A lot of people knew what they looked like, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is, with the hand over the face, I didn't think that really covered much. I was surprised that they thought that was helping, but I think your eyes are what really, tells what your face is kind of, your eyes are like the most important part of your face.
Yeah. So
I don't know how much the hand over the face. I know Gene did it a lot with Cher when he was with Cher, because he got caught a lot out in clubs, I guess, or at different events with her. I even did it once in 16 magazine. I was covering Peter's face.
Yeah.
But people didn't know what they looked like. Like when we lived in Manhattan, nobody knew who Peter was in Manhattan. Nobody knew who Peter was in Brooklyn until he told the neighbors. They had no idea they were living next door to somebody that lives in Kiss, because they don't know, in the early days, they just wore, you only saw, Kiss with the makeup on. So you didn't know what they looked like without the makeup. So, it actually kept us, our privacy pretty intact, because we weren't like bombarded by paparazzi most of the celebrities are nowadays.
But weren't the paparazzi? Well, I don't even know if there was a huge paparazzi type thing back then. But weren't all the reporters, actively trying to get pictures of them?
Well, a lot of them would like to have, but they weren't allowed to. And, my question once was, well, what happens? Because there were photographers that went on tour with us, like Barry Levine and Bob Gruen, and, they had pictures, they had some photos with, that were candid shots without the makeup. And, I always ask, well, what if they, tried selling them? And my answer from Bill Coyne was, well, if they try selling them, they'll never work with us again.
Well, so, I can see that point of it, but now the paparazzi, they don't care, if they work with you or not.
Now everybody has a camera.
Yeah.
Years ago, it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Everybody's cell phone is a camera, so it's just different nowadays. It's just I'm amazed when I watch the news that so many accidents are on film.
Yeah.
It's already pictured. They don't. It's like the surveillance videos of people, robbing places.
It's just crazy.
It is.
It's crazy.
I can't even believe how stupid a robber or somebody that's going to try to kill someone would even think that they're not being photographed. Especially a robber. When they rob a store, every store's got cameras now.
So when people did find out about who you were, maybe your neighbors or whatever, what about the stalkers? Were there people, snooping around, knocking on your door, trying to meet Peter?
Yeah, well, that was once we moved up to Connecticut. Believe it or not, you think you're in you're in the country, because we had 6.25 acres, so we were pretty desolate. And we had a big, long, about 1/4 mile driveway, so we didn't think anybody would bother us. And eventually, we were going to put gates up, but we never got around to that. But the thing is, I guess the real estate brokers might have leaked out, who Peter was, because, we'd wake up some mornings and we'd see somebody sitting on a rock all the way we had a pond, so at the other side of the pond there'd be somebody sitting on a rock with binoculars or a camera. That was one time I remember. There were times where somebody would actually come and knock at the door and ask for Peter. And at that time, we had Eddie Belandez living with us, who was one of Kiss's security guards. and he, he would say, "I am Peter Criss." Because they'd say, "Can we believe Peter Criss?" And he'd say, "I am Peter Criss," and they'd be so disappointed. But we did once we were living in Connecticut, and we were going to the town. The town was, it was about a 20-minute drive to get to the, 15-20-minute drive to get to the town, because we lived in the backwoods of Greenwich. And, it was all wooded acres where we lived, whereas the town was like a town, that you'd see, in most cities have. Mm-hmm. We went, and we were doing some shopping, and then we decided to get something to eat. And there's not many fast food places in Greenwich, and there was a place, I guess, Wendy's. And so we said, let's go, get something to eat. We went to get some chili, and we were sitting there, and Peter says to me, "They know who I am." Now, this is without the makeup, and we drove into town with, instead of our Mercedes, we took the station wagon. So we were trying to be very low-key. And he said, they know who I am. I said, "Oh, you're just being paranoid. Stop, don't be ridiculous." So we had our food, and as we were leaving, as we were walking out, somebody yelled his name, Peter, and your natural instinct is to turn around. So we turned around, and somebody said, "See, I told you it was him." So we rushed out of Wendy's and jumped in the car and sped off, But that was probably one of the only times that we were stalked. I mean, there were times we would go to Madison Square Garden, and they wouldn't even know who he was.
Well, did it bother Peter that the makeup was actually hiding the fact that he was a rock star?
It did at times, and it didn't at other times. See, it was, it worked to his benefit at certain times, and certain times it didn't. Like when he went to Madison Square Garden, and we were backstage. I think we went to go see Fleetwood Mac, and we were backstage, and nobody even offered him anything to drink, and meanwhile they were treating some other person that was a much lesser known star. I'm not going to mention her name because she's not with us anymore. But anyway, they were treating her like she was a queen, and meanwhile they had no idea who Peter was. See, that one bothered him. Other than, but the other aspect of it is that, we did have our privacy a lot. We were able to go to clubs, and people wouldn't annoy us.
Yeah, you could do your thing. Yeah.
We wouldn't be like hounded for autographs and photos and stuff like that because people didn't know who he was.
It's just it's a strange thing. It's almost like being Batman.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
But okay, so let me ask you this one. So I interviewed the Paul Stanley of Mr. Speed, which is a Kiss tribute band.
I know Mr. Speed.
Mr. Speed, okay. Well, then Rich Kozak.
I know Andrew. They're from the Ohio area, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And really, really good band, really nice guy, great interview. Me and him had a lot in common as far as our youth. And I guess one of my questions would be, who would be your favorite Kiss tribute band that you've seen? I know you've seen a lot. And did any of the Peter Crisses cause you to do a double take?
Well, the first time I ever saw somebody in Peter's makeup was at a Kiss convention, and it caused me to do a triple take. I was shocked. I don't know if he was he might have been in a cover band, but it was back in the 80s, so I really don't remember if he was there just as a fan or if he was in the band that was performing there. But I kind of take a double take a lot when I see somebody wearing Peter's makeup. I do like Mr. Speed. I do like Kiss Nation. Kiss Nation, believe it or not, is a New York-based cover band, and the Paul Stanley is, believe it or not, my ex-boyfriend, one of my ex-boyfriends,
Wow. Wow.
It
So
wasn't a Paul Stanley when I went out with him, though. But everybody thought he was Paul when I would, go to concerts with him, or if I would go to conventions with him. They would be more interested in him than me.
So I guess I'm asking you, which, I guess Kiss Nation would be your favorite Kiss tribute band?
Well, the thing is, I really can't say because I've seen them, but I've seen them in two strange ways. I've only seen them perform twice. Once, and they were both at Kiss conventions. One was acoustic set, so you can't really,
Right.
you can't really judge the same way as if they're just playing acoustically. And the other set was at a Kiss convention, and they were playing all the obscure Kiss songs that I'm familiar with, but that you'd never hear Kiss play. So I can't really judge, but I do know that that the Paul Stanley, my ex-boyfriend, is an amazing Paul Stanley.
Yeah, and I know that Paul said that he's never seen a good me. Somebody asked him about that.
We said that?
Somebody asked him what he thought about tribute bands, and he said, "Well, I've never seen a good me."
Oh, okay.
And I thought that was interesting.
It's the easiest to imitate, with his dialogue.
Yeah. Well, I was just kind of wondering if you've seen a tribute band out there that you thought was the best one, the one that's got closest to them, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Well, I was amazed when I first saw Kiss Army, but I've seen a lot more since then, so it's different. It's there's a lot more competition. And when I first saw them, there weren't that many.
Well, I got one loaded question for you for the very last one, and then we've got to plug your book again. What are your thoughts on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
That's a hard one. The thing is, I kind of see Peter and Ace's side, and I also see Gene and Paul's side. The problem is, I feel that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, their rules, I know that their rules have been broken, but their rules are you have to have had an album out at least 25 years ago. Now, Kiss, of course, falls into that category very easily, but Tommy Thayer hasn't been with them for 25 years, so he doesn't qualify. I'm not sure about Eric Singer because he's been with them, then he wasn't with them, then he's back with them again. So it might be 25 years ago now. I think Bruce Kulick might qualify. So I'm not really sure, but then, I also feel, the same way Peter and Ace feel that, that basically it's their makeup, it's them that created it, and even though it might not belong to them anymore, it's still theirs, and it's not easy to see someone else wearing your makeup. So I don't know. I think they actually made the best choice by not performing. I know the fans are not going to want to hear that, but I think that's the best way out of the whole situation. And Gene and Paul have kept the band going for 40 years. There were times where Peter and Ace, just were doing their own thing. And, there were times where Kiss wasn't even doing that well, but they still did carry on the name. And, I have mixed feelings. I really feel, I understand both of their, both of the way they've explained, their situation with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, here's my thing with it, and I know that Paul and Gene's kept the band going, okay? And yes, Bruce Kulick and Eric Carr were great musicians. Kiss, to me, whenever that transition happened, it turned into a different band. I mean, they could have called it something else. You know what I mean? And that's just my opinion, because it's coming from a 70s Kiss fan. I mean, to me, the original guys are the original four. But at the same time, you know, you have Gene Simmons come out and Paul Stanley come out, and they say, okay, we're not going to play with these guys. They're a cancer, you know, and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, you know, Ace comes up and says, okay, they've contacted us and we're talking about playing, and we'll see what happens. And then he comes out again and he says, okay, they want us to come up and play, but they want us to receive the award and go sit down and let Eric and Tommy wear the makeup for the grand finale. And he said, well, if it's going to be like that, if they're going to disrespect me like that, then I'm not even going to show up.
Right, I heard Ace talking to Eddie Trunk on television.
So I'm sitting here thinking, as a Kiss fan, I'm going, okay, they got some differences between them, right? And you know, Paul and Gene can go on about how bad of a drunk and drug addict and just unworkable musician that both these guys were. But my whole problem with it is that's the excuse that they want to use to put them down. But my problem with it is it wasn't an issue in 1996.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You know, the other thing that I also want to point out is Gene and Paul say, well, you know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has made exceptions for, you know, different people in the, you know, like, I can't even give you an example, like maybe one of the bands, whatever, you know, whoever that they've, say the Eagles. The Eagles have changed members, you know, and they weren't the originals, but it's okay for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to do that with the Eagles, but it's not okay for them to do it with Kiss. But in that context, if Paul wants to say, well, then we should give credit to Bruce, and we should give credit to Tommy and to Eric, Paul should also say we should give credit to Vinnie Vincent.
Absolutely.
Because he's got his, see, if the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame can pick out their little particular, their little particular corpse, then, you know, Paul's doing the same thing.
Yeah, he is. He's doing the same thing. And you know, you got a fight going on between Kiss and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but you also have a fight going on between Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss. And to me, the fans lose on this, especially the 70s Kiss fans, the ones who bought all those albums and posters and put Kiss where they are today.
I know.
Of those, were you were all part of that. You understand that. The 70s Kiss fans are the ones that are upset about this. The new Kiss fans, they don't care. They think the new Kiss is Kiss.
Well, you want to know something that's very funny you say that, because I was doing a Kiss convention, and there was a little boy there, really amazing drummer. And I asked him who's his favorite member of Kiss. And he said, Eric Singer.
Well,
I don't think he even knew who Peter was.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean,
wearing this makeup. He's wearing Peter's makeup, but he relates to Eric Singer.
Well, look, I didn't like it when Eric Carr came into the band. I liked Eric Carr. I thought he's a killer, massive drummer and a really great guy.
Right.
But
I agree.
I didn't like it when he came into the band. It was right after Dynasty, and Dynasty to me was the broken cookie that was in the cookie jar. Because I didn't like disco. And at that time I was trying to meet girls and stuff. I was just, 13, 14 years old, and disco sucked to me. And, everybody had the Disco Sucks shirt on. And then Kiss comes out with this song, and I'm like, what in the world is that? I'm not even buying that album, because to me, with that one song meant the rest of the album was a disco album. We both know it wasn't. It was a pretty good album. But right when Eric Carr came into the band, I was like, oh man, this is the end. This is the end of Kiss. This is it. This is, Peter's gone. The next thing that came into my mind, well, Ace will be gone, or one of the other guys will be gone. And the band's, it's falling apart. That's what was going through the fans' mind, this fan's mind. And, so every little album after that, there was, here's the new Kiss album. I would listen to it, and I'd go, I don't know if I like it or not. And I had those feelings all the way up until present, to me, Gene Simmons' big thing is, we've been out here for 40 years doing this. We've been out here for 40 years. But in those 40 years, there's only been two things that they've done since the 70s Kiss that even compares to the 70s Kiss. And you were there.
And what are those two things? Now I'm interviewing you.
What are those two things?
Yeah.
Those two things is the MTV event and the 1996 reunion.
And then, okay. I was at both.
That's the only two things, and Kiss became big again. So I've talked to other podcasters and other people about the same situation. To me, what that says is they used Peter and Ace to bring the original four reunion back together. Made a big media spectacle out of it. Made a lot of money, huge money. Way more money than Kiss was making before the reunion.
I agree with you. There were times where Kiss would play a big venue, and they would cut off half the venue just to make it look like a full house. Right,
and then you have television shows, football teams. Whatever else that's got Kiss's name on it right now, that's exploding. Gene Simmons' family all have TV shows now, and I think every bit of that came from the money made from the reunion. And they're saying that these guys are cancers, and they've wore out their welcome. They can't wear their makeup on the stage, and they blew it up in the media, and it's. To me, it's just a bad way to see a band to go out. It's terrible.
I know.
It's terrible. And, again, I go back to what I said. Their issues with Peter and Ace in the 70s didn't have any weight in 1996. So, evidently, it's more about the money,
Yeah.
So,
of course.
So what's the problem now?
I know.
So that's the problem that I have, that I'm seeing very clearly, and Paul and Gene's being very vocal about it,
I guess that right, when you do the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you don't get paid for it, so maybe that's why.
Right. And is there anything that, anything in Peter's book, or I don't know if you read Ace's book?
Yeah, I read Ace's book, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good book, too.
I haven't read Gene's, but I have read Ace and Peter's, and I do intend to read Paul's. I think Paul finally straightened a lot of things out.
Yeah. Well, is there anything in Ace and Peter's book that you believe that has pissed off Gene and Paul so bad that they don't want to have nothing to do with these guys? That they've have Ace and Peter let something out of the basket that people didn't know about?
I don't know specifically because, like I said, I was only with Peter up until the end of 79. And even during 79, we were separated, so I really wasn't with him. I was, I'm still married to him, but I wasn't really with him. So, but I know deep down it's always been the money, and I know it's always been the fact that they feel they're being cheated out of some of the funds. And the thing is, like you said, if it wasn't for the money, there would not have been a reunion tour.
Yeah, there wouldn't be no LA football team right now. I guarantee you that.
Right.
So, and to me, I don't think Tommy Thayer and Eric Singers put that money in their pocket. Just, to me, them guys wearing their makeup is big disrespect. If you had Peter and Ace come on TV or something, or a news conference, and say, yeah, we sewed our makeup off, and we, everybody just, let them be the Kiss they want to be now. It's cool.
As far as I know, Ace did not sell his makeup. Now, this is what Ace told me sitting in my living room It might have been, maybe 10 years ago. But at that point, he said to me, and I thought I heard him just mention recently, maybe even in Rolling Stone's, the article that, the magazine that came out today, the one there on the cover, he did not sell his makeup. He leases his makeup to them. So basically, they have to pay him every time they do a performance and Tommy puts the makeup on. That's what Ace told me in my apartment, and I just read recently that this is coming out of Ace, a quote from Ace, so maybe it was when he was talking to, I'm not sure if I read it or if he was talking to Eddie Trunk, I'm not sure, but he said that there will be a time in the near future that he gets his makeup back.
That would be awesome. I'd like to see him come out with his new album with his face makeup on.
His album was, I think it was announced, I read it today, that it's coming out in June.
Yeah, that would be awesome if he could just come out with his new album, have his face makeup on, and unleash it from Kiss, after everything's been said. But to me, Lydia, I think Peter Criss and Ace Frehley should just go ahead and go to the Hall of Fame. Go up to the people who run the show and say, look, we want to play a song with Paul Schaefer's band. He'll be there. Oh, and I want to sing Beth.
Peter's worked with Paul Schaefer many times.
Yeah.
And he did, I think he did his last, he knows Paul very well. Yeah. And I spoke to Paul. I've spoken to Paul after he worked with Peter, and so, I know he worked with Peter on Peter's last CD.
To me, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, I just think that they could have, they're supposed to be professionals. They're millionaires. They're supposed to be professionals. And they could have went out in a different way, in a different fashion. Now, all this talk about the Kiss 2.0, where they're going to get members from these other bands to carry Kiss on, and Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons is going to resign. Have you heard anything about that?
I've heard that many, many years ago, like I'd say 20 years ago, they would, 15, 20 years ago, that they were, the fans were joking and saying, that eventually it'll be a Kiss cover band run by Gene and Paul, and they'll just be sitting home collecting the money. And then about, I'd say maybe a year ago, I think I read something where, Paul said that could possibly happen.
Well, if it does, it's just going to take the work away from all of the tribute bands. But to me, this is what I would like to see. More than that, would be more interesting, is their children carry it on. Even though there's females there's females in that mix, their children could do that, But it's just a big letdown to me. I just think that they could have done this in a more professional manner. They could have brought all of the guys up and that's been a part of the band, gave them an award and had a little ceremony, but they're, made it really more about the original core. What are they going to do when they go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Are they going to, slice this film, however long it is, and put all this other Kiss stuff in it and just make the, original 4 thing real limited? If it wasn't for the 70s Kiss, there would be no Kiss. And think about,
of course, we don't know that.
Yeah, think about this. If they had never put makeup on, would we even be listening to Kiss albums? Would anybody even cared?
Probably not.
Okay, well, there you go. And I'm just, I'm just sitting here thinking, these 2 guys were part of this. You guys were part of this. Get over it. You're grown men, and go out in style. They could get together easily with their chemistry and just throw, water under the bridge and put out a last album. They don't even have to tour with it. Just put out a killer album and say, see ya,
Yeah.
But instead, we got to wait for Kiss 2.0 and all this other stuff. But
I never referred to that way, 2.0.
But anyway, Lydia, tell us one more time. Is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say where you can get my book. Okay, first, it's probably, all right, I know I'm being very modest in saying this, but it's probably the best Kiss book out there. Cool. And the most accurate and the most honest Kiss book out there. History is a great book, and I didn't copy History because basically I had the idea before History came out. What I did copy was Bill Wyman's book, Rolling with the Stones. Okay, that's how I wanted my book, and I actually went right after his his printer, and because I wanted the quality that he had in his book. So I went to his printer. I didn't want my the binding to fall apart like History did. But anyway, my book is available on my website. It's www.lydiacriss.com, and it's available on eBay and Amazon, and it's on sale right now on my website. So if you're interested, it's now's the time to get it. I'm leaving it on just until after the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So then it'll go back to its original price. And but it's a great book, and everybody loves it.
Lydia Criss. So that's a wrap. Well, that's it, folks. Until next time, this is the Plaster Podcaster saying, I'm out. Oh, yeah.
Look, it's rock and roll.